Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Let's Talk. I'm Dr. Anita Raja, and I hope you are all very well today. As you know, October is a very important month because we talk about baby loss in October. It is a topic very close to my heart because it's a topic that sadly is not talked about enough. When we talk about baby loss, there's still a lot of stigma, a lot of shame associated with it. People don't want to talk about it. And sometimes that is simply not good enough. I've been immensely lucky today because I have two amazing guests on my show who are going to talk about their journeys, which are very private and personal, yet they've had the courage to come on the show and discuss this with us. My first guest is a very, very lovely Sophie Martin, who is a midwife, works for the NHS. She's someone that I've been following very, very closely in terms of her journey. Welcome to our show, Sophie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Anita.
Sophie, my first question is about your documentation of your journey, which has been so personal, so private, and so close to my heart because I followed you quite closely. You've been through ups and downs, and of course, you know, you've put these posts up on social media and encouraged so many other women out there. How did you come up with that idea?
Well, when my husband and I were first trying for a baby, it wasn't happening, and I felt really lonely. And I just was scrolling on my phone on Instagram one day, and you can type in hashtags, and I typed in infertility just one day, and all of a sudden I realised that there was this whole community on Instagram of other women who were trying to have a baby, and I thought, oh gosh, like other people who I can talk to. So I set up my little account, and it was anonymous to start with, and it was just a way that I could connect with other women because I didn't know anyone that was struggling to have a baby at the time. So I just set up this account and was kind of documenting my and my husband's journey, and it was, yeah, as I said, it was anonymous to start with, and it was just simple things like going to see the GP and being referred, and kind of my dietary improvements, and just anything that I was doing that was kind of linked to infertility or fertility, so that I could connect with other women. And then it kind of went from there, really. The account grew more and more as I got, I guess, better at writing, and yeah, it just sort of grew from there. You know, the infertility and the trying to conceive community on Instagram itself has grown massively. I think people are talking about it slightly more, or at least they're seeking connection. So yeah, it literally came from just being incredibly lonely and wanting other women to talk to.
And Sophie, you know, you are a midwife and you work for the NHS. And of course, you sort of deal with lots and lots of women who are having their babies. And it's such a bundle of joy, and it's such an amazing moment in their lives. Whilst you were struggling with infertility, how did you deal with this? Because it must be such a mix of emotions for you.
Yeah, it was really tough. It definitely had good days and bad days. I think I really love being a midwife, really, really love it. And one thing that I didn't want was for infertility to take that away from me. I felt like it had taken so much from my life that I really didn't want it to take this one thing for me. That said, I did decide to go part-time after we'd done a few rounds of IVF, just because I was finding it really difficult to juggle just the hours. I lived quite far away from my hospital, so I had quite a long commute, but then also just the intensity of being a midwife. It's a very, very full-on job, and then also some areas I preferred working in more than others. So when you're a midwife, there you can work on the postnatal ward, you can work on the labour ward, you can work in the antenatal clinic, and I definitely found it hardest working on the postnatal ward, so I stopped doing that as well because it was really challenging for me being around all of these babies. And what I tried to do was just hold on to the joy of being a midwife, because I didn't want to end up resenting it, because actually it is difficult when you're surrounded by women who are having their babies and it seems very easy for them, and it wasn't easy for me. So I tried to manage the job so that I still could enjoy doing it.
And when we talk about IVF on the NHS, getting IVF is incredibly difficult. I mean, there's so many boxes that you have to tick. I mean, how long after your marriage did you actually think that you will have to sort of resort to IVF? And did you get any options on the NHS?
So we started trying for a baby a year after we got married, and if you're under 35, you should try for a year before you seek any help from your GP. So that's what we did. Although after kind of about 9 months, I sort of started to think that it wasn't going to happen for us. And so we went to our GP, who referred us for all the blood tests and things like that. And we went to our local gynae department, who wanted to do more tests and things like that. So it's quite a long process to get referred for IVF on the NHS. Now, I actually wasn't eligible to have IVF on the NHS because my blood results were extremely poor, and they thought that it would be unlikely it would succeed with me. So I was not eligible for IVF on the NHS. But I also didn't want to wait very long either, because the waiting list on the NHS is very, very long. You can be waiting for over a year to get treatment on the NHS. So we decided to go privately because I didn't want to wait, but I wasn't eligible anyway. But it really depends on your CCG as well. So it depends where you live as to whether you would be eligible for funding or not, which is it's a big postcode lottery, which is very unfair.
Yes, definitely, because in Worcestershire, which is very close to Birmingham, where I'm based, you can get 2 sessions of IVF on the NHS, whereas in Birmingham, you can only get 1, which is very unfair, because within like a 15-mile radius, there's such a big difference in the amounts of sessions you can get on the IVF. And as you know, the more cycles you get, the more there's a chance of you actually conceiving. So it is quite demoralizing for many people when they're turned down or turned away or not even offered an option. So when you went privately, how was your journey? How was your experience?
So it was very quick, actually. So from going to the clinic, we actually started IVF within a month. We'd done some kind of our homework beforehand, so we'd gone to visit clinics and done open days and things like that. But once we decided the clinic that we'd chosen, we started IVF straight away, which was a relief, actually, because I was so desperate to get the ball rolling. When you've been trying for a baby and you can't have one, every month that ticks by that you're not pregnant feels like 10 years. It feels so difficult every month when you get your period and you haven't got pregnant. So I was so happy that we could start really quickly. They were very positive, and it was a very good experience, our first round of IVF.
And how many cycles of IVF did you require?
So in total, I've actually done 6 egg collections, which is a lot. It's a lot more than most people will need to do. But I did something called embryo banking, which is where I did several rounds of IVF back to back, just to collect all the embryos without putting any embryos back. So I did 4 back to back so that I could collect the embryos for the freezer. But most people don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm. And could you tell our viewers what they should expect? So if someone is actually thinking of IVF, what is the process? What should they be expecting?
Sure. So when you start IVF, there are many different protocols, but essentially what happens is you stimulate your ovaries to grow follicles nice and big. Now, you have several follicles on your ovaries, and usually in your natural menstrual cycle, one follicle will grow the biggest and release the egg, which would be fertilized. Now, in IVF, you're trying to grow all of the follicles so that they've all got an egg in. So instead of just getting your one egg, which you would have when you have your menstrual cycle, actually you're trying to grow as many eggs as possible. So you inject yourself with stimulating medication to grow those follicles nice and big. So you start off with that injection. Then partway through the IVF cycle, you start a second injection, which will stop you from ovulating too early. So you take 2 injections. Then once your follicles are kind of a nice big juicy size, you're ready for them to be collected. So you take something which is like a trigger injection, which encourages your body to ovulate. So 36 hours later, it's all timed very precisely, you go in for your egg collection, which is where the doctor will just pop a small needle into the vagina, up and into your ovaries, and try and take out any eggs that are in the follicles. So they're all collected, and then obviously they'll be mixed with your partner's sperm to see if any fertilise, and then hopefully you've got some nice embryos, and the ideal time to pop them back inside is 5 days after your egg collection. So that's kind of IVF in a very small nutshell. Obviously there are big variations, but that's the kind of basic process.
Lovely. And Sophie, after your IVF, I mean, after how many cycles did you actually manage to conceive?
So I actually got pregnant with my twins on my first round of IVF, so we were very, very lucky. But then it obviously took another 5 rounds after that to get pregnant again.
Mm-hmm. And it's a very, very sensitive topic, of course. And I have followed you quite closely when you suffered with the loss of your beautiful baby boys. Were there any warning signs or not? How did you find out?
Yeah, so there were no warning signs. I actually just went into spontaneous labour. I'd had a little bit of bleeding and I was admitted to hospital. I was 21 weeks pregnant, and I was pregnant with identical twins. And I just went into labour very, very quickly. And eventually it became apparent that I had incompetent cervix, so my cervix wasn't strong enough to keep the boys in there. But yeah, it all was very, very quick. There was no way of knowing that was going to happen, which is obviously very sad. So yeah, we were devastated, really.
Mm-hmm. No, but Sophie, it's people like you who actually give other women the courage because they talk about their sorrow. Because when we look at social media, unfortunately, it's all about the glamour, the beauty, the cars, the happiness, the meals, but nobody actually talks about their struggles, their pain, their sorrow. So it's amazing that you came forward and are speaking to us about this. Viewers, it's time for a break. You can be part of our show, but it's time for a break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Let's Talk. Before we went on to the break, we were talking to lovely Sophie Martin, who's a midwife in the NHS, and she was sharing her rather difficult journey with us. And the idea of today's show, as all of you know, is to discuss baby loss. October is a month where we celebrate it because we want to talk about this. We want to bring these beautiful mothers together and talk about their experiences, because it's important that we don't shun these things away, but we actually talk about them, normalize it, and help these women out there. Sophie, thank you so much once again for being on our show. Before we went on to the break, you told us about the very difficult time in your life where you lost your lovely twins. But I want to congratulate you on your lovely baby who's 9 weeks old now. It's just so lovely to know that you've got a little baby now that you're looking after and is waking you up every 2 hours at night, you tell me. So you're up at night really feeding the little one.
Yes, so, I'm up all night feeding him. He's so lovely, but he's a very hungry boy.
Which is good because it gives you time to bond with your little one. Sophie, you talked about an incompetent cervix, and it is a reality. And unfortunately, you're absolutely right that many women lose their babies, especially in the second trimester, if they've got this condition where their cervix is not competent, can't hold the weight of the babies, and they can then, of course, suffer from a miscarriage. Now, after this very big loss of yours, did you get the support that you needed?
That's a really interesting question, actually, because I do think that there is not a huge amount of support out there. I was very lucky that my family are hugely, hugely supportive, and I'm so very, very lucky to have such an amazing family. But in terms of kind of actual professional support. There's really very little offered on the NHS, especially if your loss is pre-24 weeks. There are obviously lots of charities around who offer support and things like that. But again, that can be really varied depending on where you live and what gestation your loss was. And then things like, well, there's a service called iApt, which is free for everyone, but it's not specific to baby loss. But I did definitely find there was very limited professional support, which was free, because there are obviously amazing professionals out there charging privately, but in terms of kind of free accessible support for women who've had losses like mine, I actually thought that there was very little available.
And it's very sad, isn't it, when we talk about this, because it is a reality, and unfortunately the support is not out there, the one that you'd actually think. And for a first world developed country, I mean, it's shocking. I know this out of experience, of course, because I also lost a baby in the second trimester, and it was difficult. But I was lucky because I was in Birmingham, and in Birmingham we had the Tommy's charity, which did excellent work. I mean, they're excellent in terms of supporting women, bereaved mothers, and they also support you through your following pregnancies, and they try and investigate why you've lost the baby, and they put in a lot of research and money into this. But, you know, is there anything that we could do and put in place in terms of more support in the NHS? I mean, do you think that this is an area that does require a bit more funding, perhaps a bit more effort?
Absolutely. I mean, even in my pregnancy that I've just had, I was rejected from perinatal services 3 times. You know, it's really difficult to get support, even if you're desperately asking for support. And, you know, when you've lost a baby, it's devastating. You can't explain really how hugely impactful it is on your life, and how going forwards your life is never the same again. And I feel like it should be offered as standard. You know, people can choose whether they want to do it, but there should be something there that we can offer all parents who've lost a baby. So I would love to see there be a big injection of support, you know, funding and things like that, so that parents can get the support they need.
Mm-hmm. And especially, I mean, you were lucky enough to be able to sort of fund your fertility, you know, your IVF. But there's so many people out there who can't fund it, for instance. And sometimes when you look at the criteria of acceptance, it is quite difficult, quite appalling. I mean, sometimes I just feel so sorry when we get these women calling in and they want IVF on the NHS, but it just seems like it's impossible because they don't tick the boxes. I mean, there should certainly be some sort of subsidy, I think, when it comes to that. Now, in terms of your pregnancy with your lovely 9-weeker, how was your pregnancy? And tell us a bit more about your journey through this pregnancy.
Yeah, so I'm sure you can understand, incredibly anxious during the pregnancy. I was so worried that something was going to go wrong. And in both of my pregnancies, I had quite bad morning sickness. So I always felt a bit ropey in the first trimester anyway. But then, yeah, I was very anxious. Now, because I had incompetent cervix, I had, in between getting pregnant, had a permanent stitch put into my cervix so that I would hopefully not go into labour early again. So I was very worried about everything, but about the stitch and things like that. So I didn't really do very much physically at all. I was so worried about sending myself into labour. And I did end up in hospital for 5 days at around 22 weeks in case I was going into labour, but thankfully I wasn't. But I would say, kind of from a medical perspective, it was a fairly straightforward pregnancy, but I was very, very anxious the whole time. And actually, even getting past 24 weeks, which you would think, you know, viability would make me feel better, it didn't. And the closer I got to the end of the pregnancy, the more worried I got, because I was really worried that it was going to be taken away, that all of a sudden, you know, something terrible would happen and I wouldn't get to bring home the baby again. So it was a really, really difficult time. I mean, it's only been 9 weeks, and the 9 weeks since Percy has been born have just flown by, because every day in my pregnancy felt like a year. It was so long trying to get through every day, not knowing whether my baby would ever come home.
It's devastating, isn't it? Baby loss. I wish people out there would be more compassionate. There would be more empathy, especially in our healthcare professionals, and you would get more support out there. And I totally believe you, and I totally feel for you, and I know exactly how you feel. The anxiety is unbelievable, and I guess the confidence is all lost. You see, when you see these mums out there with their bums, displaying their bums, and having a pregnancy photo shoot and a baby reveal and a gender reveal and God knows what else, you look at them and you think, oh my God. I remember when I was pregnant with my baby, who's 13 months old now. Whenever I used to see a picture on Instagram of a woman displaying her bum and doing a gender reveal, I would do a little prayer in my heart for the safety of the baby, because it is something so emotional. And you really pray for all these beautiful babies out there and their mothers and their safety, especially if you've gone through something that's so big, so life-changing. I think you can never revert to who you were before this loss. It really does knock your confidence. And Sophie, you've been immensely brave, because you've spoken about your IVF, your infertility. You've spoken about baby loss, and then now we are hearing a lot from baby Percy and your sleepless nights. But for women out there who are actually struggling at the moment, are unable to conceive, what sort of message do you have for them?
Well, firstly, just my heart goes out to anyone who is going through it, because having lived through it for 4 years, I mean, you can't even really put into words how difficult it is. So one thing I would say is really try and find a little support network, however that is for you. So for me, it was joining Instagram. I also joined the Fertility Network. So they do regional support groups, and I live in Essex, so I joined the Essex one. And this was pre-COVID. We did face-to-face meetups, so we would meet other women who were going through infertility, and I've made the most incredible friends from that. And we don't always talk about infertility, but they just have an understanding of how infertility affects all of your life. So there's loads of ways that you can kind of make connections, but I would say that was really important to me through that journey, because it's very isolating when you can't have a baby. You feel like everyone else can and you're the only one that can't. And then also it can be really difficult to go to social situations where you're seeing other people having babies, or you've got family members asking, when are you having a baby? So I felt like I didn't want to go to social events. So building a little support network of people who I could talk to felt really empowering to me. Another thing that I found particularly empowering was doing lots of research. Now, this might not be up everyone's street, and I do feel quite lucky. Obviously, being a midwife, I'm quite used to reading journals and things like that. So I went to town on researching IVF. I feel like I could have a PhD in infertility, because I felt like I had read everything. So that might not be for everyone, but I feel like knowledge is power. So if you're going into your appointments, having done even some very small research, it can be really helpful for you, because you're understanding what the doctor's saying to you. You don't have to have a PhD to understand it. There is some really accessible reading out there. So they would be things that I would advise. And then also, don't put pressure on yourself to feel positive all the time. So, you don't always have to be thinking good thought. You don't always have to be, I think there's this big pressure of like thinking, oh, it's all going to be all right. It's all going to be all right. If you don't feel that that's how it's going to be, don't put pressure on yourself. All you have to do is get through each day. Like, you don't have to look all the way at the end, because actually sometimes that can seem too difficult. Don't put that pressure on yourself. If all you can do is get through the rest of the day, then you've done enough, basically.
Sophie, you've put it so aptly, so beautifully. I knew that I would enjoy inviting you to my show, because you are a gem. You're a beautiful human being who's got, who's an ocean of knowledge when it comes to fertility, IVF, and you've been through it all, and it's made you much stronger, much more beautiful than you already are. Thank you so much for coming on our show and being part of our show. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to chat to you.
So, viewers, when we talk about baby loss, it certainly is something that we do need to talk about much more. October is a month where we actually talk about lots of baby loss, because it's a topic that certainly is being brushed under the carpet. Viewers, it's time for a break. We're going to continue this topic, but after the break. Welcome back to Let's Talk. Today we're talking about baby loss and the challenges that we face with it. I have suffered from it myself, and it's a topic very close to my heart. When we talk about baby loss within the South Asian community, it is a whole new ballgame. And of course, there is the process of grief. But because we are so acceptable of this process in itself, I guess sometimes we're not allowed to grieve and we're not given the support that we require. Hence, I thought it might be vital to invite someone who can share her journey with us and is from the South Asian community. So we've got lovely Ruksar online, who's here with us today and is going to share her journey with us. Ruksar, thank you so much to be part of our show. You're part of the Muslim community group, and you're providing support to so many women out there who have suffered from baby loss. So it's immensely courageous of you to come on our show today and talk about this topic, because it certainly is a very, very sensitive topic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you for having me today.
Ruksar, my first question to you is, in terms of your journey, your baby loss, could you tell our viewers about what exactly happened?
So it was our first pregnancy, and we were quite naive in the fact that we thought that everything was just going to be okay. And it wasn't until we got to about 13 weeks that we actually started miscarrying, and it was quite traumatic. Not only was it traumatic because of the grief and the loss that I was experiencing, but I also had a really difficult time in hospital, receiving care. And then I had a very difficult time with just receiving support from whether it was like the family, friends, and just generally the wider community. So yeah, it was a struggle. It is still a struggle. It never leaves you. And I know a lot of women, whether it's a year down the line or 10 years down the line, will tell you the same thing. But yeah, it's very hard. It's hard to live with. It's hard to grow around it and be yourself again.
Definitely. And when you talk about lack of support, I would want to add this, that when I suffered from a miscarriage, I think I struggled as well a lot because there was lack of support. And what I was being told by people around me who certainly loved me and wanted me to just bounce back and get back into normal life was that it's okay, there'll be a next time, you're young, you'll have more children. And I guess they're trying to help when they're saying all this. But is it helpful to hear this from people?
So I personally don't find this helpful. I actually asked women before I sort of came on tonight to see what they thought about this subject and the way that we're supported, or the way that people think we feel supported, and it doesn't help. So it's kind of, and you get it from the doctors, you get it from your family, especially within the Muslim community. There's a lot of have sabr. You don't show your emotions, don't show your grief. You just get on with it, and you can't grieve, and that doesn't help the situation at all. It doesn't help you come to terms with what's going on. It doesn't help you. It just doesn't help you grieve. Full stop. So those type of comments don't help, and that's really what hinders women a lot. And you'll find a lot of South Asian or just Muslim women in general, they will not get counselling. They won't get, they won't talk to people about this subject because it's such a taboo. But then they also face that fear of backlash and being told these things of staying silent and you know, you can have more children, but this person might have been struggling to get pregnant in the first place for 10 years, and then they've just lost that baby, and that's what you're telling them. People need to think about what they say before they say them. Yeah, that I don't think those type of comments help at all. As much as they might seem that they're helping, it's not the correct way to go about it.
Yes, and do you feel that, you know, when it comes to sort of comprehending, coming to terms with a situation, especially grief, it's something that we are told to put up with, even if we're not ready for it? I mean, I think the way you've explained it is you've put it quite nicely, but I think it's more of a cultural thing, perhaps, where you are told to be tough, to get on with life. And, you know, if adversity has struck you, you're just expected to bounce back. And that's that. And if not for yourself, you're sort of emotionally persuaded to bounce back for the benefit of others. For instance, your spouse, your mother-in-law, your father-in-law, your brothers and sisters, because they can't see you upset. How should we support women who are suffering from such a huge, immense type of bereavement?
So firstly, the push to get women to bounce back, and partners as well, actually, because my husband really struggled with being normal, and we still struggle with it. Like I said, it's something that affects you for the rest of your life. So it's not just women, it's partners as well. But that sort of having to bounce back for other people when it's not your time and you're not ready isn't something that we need. What we need as people is to feel like people are listening. We need people to, sometimes all you need is a hug when you're going through the loss of your baby. And I say loss of your baby, but the reality of it is that your baby died and you can't get that back. And you're told to use your religion to sort of give you this sabr to carry on and to move forward. And it doesn't always work on a human level. So yeah, a lot of women say that they like to have their children still mentioned. I'm a great believer of this. I love people to say my baby's name. I like to be remembered on Mother's Day. All these little things that make you still feel like a mother, because obviously in my eyes, I'm a mother, but to other people, it might not seem that way. So it's about being inclusive. It's about being gentle with the person, not pushing them to come to baby showers and joining in with, you know, children parties and things like that when they're not ready. Yeah, it's really to do with being inclusive and just being kind. I don't know, a lot of women I think that I've spoken to would prefer to have someone that they can talk to openly, someone that they can go to and say, I'm not actually fine, because you find a lot of women that go through loss now lie about how they feel. And I have a few women that I speak to who are now close, very close friends, that will come to me and say, look, I'm not fine today, but I just need somebody to say that to. And then they'll get it all out, and it just helps you get on with your day. So a lot of support is just listening and being there.
Yeah, I mean, how difficult can that be? How difficult can that be? I fail to understand why we still don't have that sort of support that we require from our immediate loved ones, family members, friends, and also within our community, and why there is a push for us to sort of bounce back and get back to normal, or whatever normal is. I don't know what the standard for normal is. However, in terms of staying silent, I mean, there is a lot of silence, and I may be right to say shame associated with miscarriages and not being able to conceive. And somehow you sometimes find that many people come up to you and say, oh, when are you having your baby? But then there's the other side of this, where people are actually thinking, oh, they still haven't had a child. Or a woman might start thinking, well, you know, I have failed myself because I have not been able to conceive. I mean, what sort of message do you have for women out there who are feeling this way?
I think it's really important to remember that we don't live on a timescale for other people as much as people put the pressure on us, and as much as we actually put the pressure on ourselves. some things are out of our control, and unfortunately I'm still coming to terms with that. I have a lot of counselling, and that's something that I still have to come to terms with. And it's just about being kind to ourselves and doing things for ourselves and doing our research. I agree with what Sophie said about doing research and knowing what it is that we want for ourselves to an extent. I think that's the most important thing going forward. Sorry.
Definitely, Ruksar. And also when we use the word miscarriage, I'm certainly against the word. And I think we certainly need to rephrase this, because when you say someone is miscarrying, the blame automatically goes to the woman who's carrying the baby because she has done something wrong to miscarry this baby. So, there's a lot of guilt and shame also associated with, miscarrying. I mean, I certainly felt that way because I have a 7-year gap between my son and my both boys. And that was because I suffered from secondary infertility. And then I had baby loss at sort of second trimester. It was awful. And I had to actually give birth to a dead baby. And it's something that's very, very sensitive and very, very close and private, and up and personal, but you have to talk about it, because when will we normalize these things and support these women out there who are struggling? I mean, what are your thoughts about this term, miscarriage?
I don't tend to use it a lot. I don't like the way it sounds. It's quite a harsh word. And if I do talk about it, it is generally more pregnancy loss, baby loss. And I don't know, maybe that's just me flowering the term. But yes, I don't like the fact that it does sort of place blame on the woman, because at the end of the day, infertility or trying to get pregnant, carrying a baby, it's all down to both the parents involved, and it's not just, down to the woman. I think there's a lot of blame in Asian culture and generally actually the Muslim community, that it's the woman's fault, and there seems to be a lot of finger pointing, even when it's actually the issue lies within the male. So we just need to understand things a bit clearly, and I think that comes down to a lack of sex education in our communities, and a lack of understanding fertility and how fertility works, because when you were at school, all you were ever taught was sex once and you have a baby, but you never get taught that actually it's a lot more difficult than that. And so many women face infertility and loss, and they don't realize, especially
definitely. And in our community, I guess you are right, it's something that we do certainly need to teach our children. Viewers, you have to stay with us. It is time for a break. Welcome back to Let's Talk. Today we're talking about baby loss and the challenges that we face within our community. October is a month where we actually talk about baby loss and try and spread awareness around it. It is a topic which is least discussed. There is still a lot of stigma around it, and the scale of mental health problems that it causes, the scale of adversity that strikes families who suffer from baby loss is immense. Yet, unfortunately, it is a topic that we still need to discuss again and again. With us, before we went on to the break, we had Ruksar, who was discussing her own journey with us. She is a Muslim community support worker, and she supports women in the community who are in a similar position, who have suffered from baby loss. And she's been very, very courageous to come on our show today. Ruksar, you were telling us about how unhelpful people from within our communities can be at times. However, it would be very interesting to know a bit more about your own journey in terms of your fertility, if you'd like to discuss that and share that with our viewers today.
Yeah, that's fine. So I've been married for 4 years, and we got pregnant within our first or just after our first anniversary, and unfortunately miscarried at 13 weeks. And then after that, we have been trying for 3 years, and unfortunately nothing's happened. We tried to get on the NHS for fertility treatment, and as you were talking with Sophie, there was so much that just I could just agree with everything. That there's so many boxes that you need to tick, so many things that you need to go through. And I'm very open about the fact that my BMI was the issue for us. So we couldn't get any fertility help because my BMI is too high. I actually had private bariatric surgery last year to help improve that. And unfortunately, I'm not at the right BMI still to be able to get that NHS help. So actually, we are looking to go private and look at treatment privately, whether that be in the UK or abroad. And we have been looking into adoption as well. So we're just keeping our avenues open. We're very open about what we want to do and how we want to go forward, and just communicating that between us as a couple. But yeah, it's been hard. It's hard to be infertile, especially when I'm so much healthier than I was when I originally got pregnant, and then nobody's willing to help you. So I'm doing some private blood tests for me and my partner at the moment through Screen Me, which is on Instagram. And after that, we'll look at fertility clinics. So that's really where we are with our infertility journey.
And unfortunately, when people are failing to conceive, I mean, it's a very harsh term again, calling someone infertile or talking about their infertility journey. But let's put it in a better way. So if someone is sort of struggling to conceive and their weight is a problem, and people freely comment on their weight by saying, well, maybe you are in need of losing some weight to have a baby. I mean, I'm sure you've come across those comments. How have you dealt with it?
So I actually have PCOS as well, so that makes it a lot more difficult for me to lose the weight in the first place. And yeah, those comments don't help. I think it's less coming from family and friends, and actually I haven't had really anyone say that in the community, but more the doctors. And it's a constant battle of fat shaming versus your ability to receive help for fertility. And it's quite sad actually, because they put all of this pressure on your weight when there's so much more they could still be doing. And weight, you have plenty of big people still have children. When I was pregnant, I was so much bigger than what I am now. So it seems a shame that we can't reach out for the help that we so desperately want and need. So, yeah.
And you said that you might actually look at options abroad. So is that going to be risky, you think, or is it a safe option? Do you know anybody who's actually gone abroad and had IVF treatment?
So it's actually it's very safe. There's lots of clinics all over the world, and it's just about making sure you do your research and read the reviews. It's more about the consultants than it is the clinics. And just a lot of what I go from is other people that I've heard that have gone to these clinics, and I follow a lot of Instagram accounts and friends that I know are currently having treatment done in these places. So our Instagram account, muslima.support, that helps a lot. It helps us, but it helps other women, especially within our community, to access information like IVF clinics or just general information about fertility. Like we try to do things that touch on the Muslim and the Islamic side of things, and we also try to educate people scientifically as well. But it's been a great way to sort of help us also find out things. So yeah, that's how I've mainly found out about clinics abroad, in Greece and India and things like that. But obviously that's everyone's personal choice, and it's something that I advise a lot of research goes into before you make that jump.
Yeah, and in terms of pricing, if you compare private IVF treatment in the UK to abroad? How would you compare it?
It's crazy. So, for example, one clinic in Greece will charge you £8,000 for all your tests, plus your egg retrieval, and then the IVF on top, plus a second round if it doesn't work out. Whereas in the UK, one round is anything from 10 to 20k just for the one round.
So it's very expensive. That is very expensive.
Yeah.
Right. And in terms of adoption, you said that that's something that you have also kept in mind. I mean, you've kept all your avenues open. Is that an easy process within the UK? Have you looked at the process?
Again, I've been following a few women, specifically Muslim women, because I do want to know how it works within Islam to do the adoption process. And I've been following one sister. She's come on recently. A very, very open account. Is really good. She's lovely to talk to. And just her whole process from thinking about doing adoptions and then all the way through to where she is now, where she's being matched with a child. And it's just given me this whole new light into looking into adoption. And I don't think it's something that we would say no to. I'd like to do it even if we could have our own children. And yeah, it's a hard process. It's definitely very difficult, but I can't imagine it being any more difficult than going through infertility and every month having a negative test, or every month having that sadness and that grief come back to you, because it is like a fresh wave of grief every time you don't see a positive pregnancy test.
It certainly is. And Sophie put it in so aptly in her words when she said it's like a year. It certainly feels like years and years when it's just a couple of months of having these negative pregnancy tests. And you are right. It is just another month full of grief when you have this negative pregnancy test. Now, in terms of education, you did mention that before we went on to the break, and you said that within our community, unfortunately, there's a lack of understanding and education when it comes to sort of sex education, understanding how babies are made, and that if it is a case of not being able to conceive, then the blame can also be on the man. It's not just the woman who is to be at fault. And if we look at science, 1 in 3 cases are because there's a problem within the male partner. The sperms aren't strong enough, or there are not enough sperms, or the count isn't enough. So you see, it's something that I guess it's something that needs to be discussed quite a lot. Now, is there anything that we could do to spread awareness within our community? Because one other thing that we see quite often is that if a woman is, for instance, having 5, 6, 7 daughters, it is assumed that it's the woman's fault that she is having daughters, whereas science says that a woman plays close to no part in the sex of the baby. It's the man who plays the real vital part in that, because the woman only has that one chromosome that she can use, whereas the man has the 2 different ones. So what could we do to spread awareness within our community?
I think it all goes down to education, as I said earlier, whether that's education within our Western schools or even within our Islamic schools and our madrasas, having a space to have women's only sessions where the girls can learn about their periods and about ovulation and all the things that you just don't cover in terms of fertility, and keeping an Islamic background the whole time. So little things like women not knowing about how to do ghusl properly, that all these things come into it, and there is a lack of education, just anything to do with that, because one, most of the teachers are male, and it has changed over time recently, but definitely for me it was all male teachers. They didn't discuss that, and if they did, it wasn't the correct way to discuss it. So that's the most important thing. I think parents need to start educating themselves and learning, so that they can pass these type of sort of information onto their children as well, because it starts at home. And if we don't know what we're talking about, if we don't know about our own fertility and our own body, how are we meant to teach the future generation?
No, I totally agree with you, Ruksar, because it certainly is something that is very important, and we certainly need to speak to our children, perhaps that have that relationship, that friendly relationship. We can actually communicate with them and talk about these things. Ruksar, thank you so much for taking out your precious time and speaking to us about your very personal life and your personal journey. I'm very proud of the work that you do within our community in terms of this community support group that you've made, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So, viewers, today's topic was very sensitive, and I understand that there may have been many people out there who may have felt that this could have triggered them in any way, and hence we've got a support line. You can see it on your screens, British Muslim TV support line. If you need any type of help, you're free to contact us, and we will provide you the help that is required. Viewers, as always, we are towards the end of our show, but we would like to see you again next week. So join us again next week. Allah Hafiz.